Well, you need to have a look at a book by a chap called he's a professor anyway, Alvar Ellegard. Ellegard, Ellegard. And it's Jesus 100 years before Christ. Wow. What's he getting at? Well, let me casually say in a nutshell that he puts the Pauline literature in the context of its appropriate era of writing. And we find that Paul is not writing after the Jesus story, but before, in the early part of the first century and previous times leading up to such. Wow. To quote page 257 in his overview, get this. The earliest Christians, Paul and his fellow apostles, Peter, James and the rest, never saw or met the earthly Jesus, Jesus in the flesh. They encountered him only in visions and revelations as a spiritual being. Jesus of Nazareth, born of Mary at the end of Augustus's reign, is a fiction created in the 2nd century by the Gospel writers. Amen. I mean, quite simply, he doesn't put Paul back in time. Rather, he puts Jesus forward in time from Paul, at the least later than Paul. Paul and co. are the groundwork of what goes into the Jesus story of the 2nd century. Oh. The Gospels are simply a fabrication of the 2nd century put upon the writings of the 1st century and their upgrade through Ignatius. The 2nd century changes Ignatius's view into gospel story. So I'm wrong to say Ellegard puts Paul back into BC, although what we're saying of Paul and co. is that they belong to an age that's much more like the Essene view and the Therapeutes, and possibly Apollonius of Tyana, somewhat confusingly with Paul, I would have thought. Of the state of Judaism coping with the Greek world. And the fullness of Jesus is written into that in the Gospels. The story is developed around this, these accepted writings and views. I mean, it's hard not to see parallels with the teacher of righteousness and the Therapeutes, if not the Essenes, in the declared life of Jesus of the Gospels. And it's a form of Stoic, isn't he? He's Greek. I mean, in character, the character they've given him, written by Greeks, in Greek language. I mean, it's staring us in the face, isn't it? Okay, we may have got the gospel dates wrong. Perhaps they're earlier, they're late 1st century. Or perhaps some of the literature that we're looking at of the early writings are earlier than we think. It's hard to date things. And who knows if someone hasn't put in a few extra steps to make it harder for us to date things accurately, because they had a great vested interest in the authenticity of the Jesus story when they were going to use it for running an empire for the emperor. You're a cynic, Marshall. Yes. Well, I'm too old to be otherwise, aren't I? When you've been here nearly 80 years, you feel you've seen it all. People that love you and then don't, you can't believe it, can you? Commit themselves always. And can be unfaithful to themselves in that promise. There's lies, damned lies, and religion. But before you despair, it's all a mix of good and bad. That you sift it all to find the good. And goodness, there's much good in the Jesus story, isn't there? Wow. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. And we contrast it with the bad. And we value the good accordingly. Great. Divine purpose. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. Something I've been occupied with yesterday and the last couple of days. J. Smith, I think his name is, on YouTube in this case. In his way, does a similar, more detailed analysis for the religion of Islam. And, well, it follows the same pattern, really. It's not that religion is just prefabricated, it's that it's fabricated on values that you have and extant views of your society. And, well, we're back to what I was saying on an earlier recording. It evolves through time. There's another writer, I haven't got the book with me at the minute because I'm in the car, I'm waiting for my little girl to come out of Mum's house so I can take her to school. And but the title of his book, this other chap, is The Evolution of God. Which is, I mean, sort of deliberately provocative title, isn't it? But really you could take all three of these experts in their field. I mean, they just are. They've really put their mind to it and their abilities. And gosh, I think they have it. You know, even God evolves through time from a primitive notion of God, sun worship and so on, to an incredibly sophisticated Islamic or Christian view of God as well, quite simply compassionate. And is not to be dismissed because, you know, in some way that you want to dismiss the authors of these understandings, these three guys, as in some sense are just academics, secular. You know, you expect this sort of heresy from them. On the contrary,
It's insight into how God actually works, how He's made His creation for a purpose, and it achieves that purpose. And it doesn't rely on any one of the children by any means. It relies on forces much greater than man. God, as we see Him now as our Heavenly Dad, thanks to Jesus' story and the people that put it together. It is enlightening. I mean, take Islam. I mean, it's enlightening to know, to consider God to be Allah, the compassionate one. Yes, how wonderful. What a step in the right direction. Or the Jesus story of God, that He's our Heavenly Dad. Wow. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. When it comes to the distinction between Jesus and Christ, the terms, I would have said Christ was much more the view of what we attribute to Paul. He seldom uses the word Jesus, and it may have just been put in. But Christ is dominant. I don't think of Jesus as Christ. I think of Him as Jesus, the story of Jesus, the person in the story, in the Gospels, which, as I say, Paul doesn't seem to know much about at all, doesn't quote him, etc. Apart from the communion on the night He was betrayed. Took bread and wine, gave thanks, and so on. And given the church has added whole pastoral letters to Paul, if that is the case, and it looks very much as if it is, there's no reason why they shouldn't drop the communion into one of Paul's discourses. So, I would have actually swapped the title around and said, Jesus after Christ. But you get the point, don't you? Thank you, Heavenly Dad. And the most persuasive book, The Evolution of God. And it's by, who's it by? Robert Wright, spelt with a W, W-R-I-G-H-T. The Evolution of God. Yes. Very interesting points in there, on a much more general field of religion and the way it develops through time. Our view of God, of course. But, again, it's a title that's very much to catch your attention, isn't it? Thank you, Heavenly Dad.